Hi everyone, how are you doing? Enjoying the session so far? Well, there was only one, but that was pretty cool, right? This session is going to be really cool as well, even more than the keynote, but don't tell him. When I read the abstract, it's kind of like podcast, dog walking. I know this problem. I've got exactly the same problem. I've got this smallest dog. He's like this. I don't have to bend over to pet him. And I walk him a lot because big dogs need a lot of exercise. And I listen to podcasts, so I run out of podcasts to listen to. So I'm really looking forward to this and learning how I can generate more and exactly what I want. So Ruben, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it works. All right. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm here to talk about a project that I've set up over the past few months, which basically generates a podcast every day, which is entirely focused on my own interest about the topics that I'm personally interested in. Now, first off, a quick mandatory introduction about myself. My name is Ruben van der Leun. I'm a freelance developer currently working under the name Leunix. I'm currently working at Schiphol on the Trevor project. It powers several self-service units or kiosks that are scattered around the terminal where you can look up the map, look up information about your itinerary, or have a video call with agents. And next to that, I also very often work part-time at 360 Fabriek, and there I work on some more innovative things like large language models and extended reality stuff, augmented and virtual reality. I always first want to start off with a small anecdote about myself, and for this particular one, I wanted to highlight my profile photo. There is actually a small AI change made in it, and I am kind of wondering if people can see it. And once you know it, then you can't unsee it. This photo was taken during a vacation trip with friends. My wife took it while I was having a discussion. And what is actually happening is that I was having a cigar with friends at the time. Now, I really like this picture, and I wanted to use it as a profile photo, but well, I'm not a CEO or anything, so it wouldn't really fit as a LinkedIn photo. So then I just used AI to remove the cigar. And again, you can especially now see it if you look at the hair here. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but the only time that people see it is when I actually bring it up. For me, it was one of the first times where I actually used AI about 2 or 3 years back. And back then, I was already very impressed with what you can do. So the project itself has the very original name of rss-feeds-to-podcast. I already am calling a number of keywords here, and if you're not familiar with them yet, don't worry, I'll bring them up when I go a little bit deeper into what the project, how it works. So it generates a podcast based on any RSS feeds that you follow. You can use any kind of large language models like OpenAI or Anthropic, but you can also use any self-hosting services like Olama. The audio itself is generated using Kokoro, content is generated via Scrapper. The whole thing is built in the backend with Node. And when I set up the project, I used the Mozilla Blueprint template. The Mozilla Blueprint template is a repository that Mozilla has set up in which you can, which just has how do you call it? A generic way on setting up a workflow for any AI project, but also for documentation. So this project is honestly the most documented project I've ever built myself. It's entirely open source. It's available on GitHub. If you're interested, the URL is right here on top. And if you're interested afterwards, feel free to clone the project and have a look yourself. So one of the things that when I submitted this talk and it was actually accepted, I was kind of worried because, well, this is called Front Mania, and to be honest, there is going to be very little front-end related talk in here. Most of it is going to be JavaScript related, so I just want to very quickly bring up what you can get out of this talk, which is essentially a look at a pipeline or a workflow that goes through several steps that in the end ends up with generating a podcast episode for you to listen to, which all uses LLMs and also linked with each other. They analyze the content of each other and see what the results are. For the past couple of months, I've also become a little bit of a self-hosting hippie, meaning that I really enjoy just self-hosting any kind of services that I use myself instead of using an external service, including the large language models as well. I will admit everything that the larger corporates offer is better, so the self-hosting application does have its limits, and I would like to highlight that. And again, the whole thing is built with JavaScript in mind. I'm using the Nest.JS framework. For those who are not familiar with it, it's essentially Angular, but backend. I've been using it in the past for a couple of projects, and I really like it. It just gives you a really structured way to set up your code, and it also has support to create a command line tool. I've divided the topic into 3 separate parts. First off, why would I want to build this? Mostly just to give a bit of a backstory on how the project came to be, but that you can also understand the scope of the project. The most interesting part, I think, is going to be how was the podcast made, but if there's still time left, I would also like to very briefly discuss on should we actually want to build our own podcast, because afterwards I did have some thoughts about that. Now, to start off, why did I want to build my own podcast? Well, it already got a little bit spoiled early on. Dogs. There is an explanation for this. Essentially, during the lockdown, I suddenly discovered that Spotify had this podcast tab, and I was walking the dogs more often than before because I was working from home very much. And honestly, I got addicted to podcasts real soon, real fast, because I was able to learn all about these new topics. People were giving me all kinds of news facts that I didn't know before, so I really got into them, and I also went into the backlog of a couple of shows that I really liked. But then, after a couple of months, I basically caught up with all the shows that I wanted to watch. I saw most of the episodes, so what I ended up with is that at some point, these poor dogs would be standing in the hallway, all prepped up and ready to go. And there I was as a jackass on my phone, trying to find the right episode or something to listen to. And I'm not kidding when I say that this could take almost up to 3 to 5 minutes, while these poor creatures are just standing there. They want to go outside, and I'm just standing there, and they don't understand. So what I wanted was a solution to just quickly go outside and have a podcast to listen to. And that's essentially what the genesis of this project is. When the main idea of the project came from Notebook LM, just curious, do people know about Notebook LM? See a couple of nods. What Notebook LM does, it's a service from Google to which you can upload a couple of documents, images, or URLs, and it will then create a summary of all those topics, along with a chatbot to which you can ask things about that specific topic. But what stood out the most for me was the audio overview option in the upper right. Basically, when you press that, it will generate a podcast of about 2 minutes where 2 hosts will talk about the topics that you've uploaded, which sounds a little bit something like this.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a stack of sources here detailing Frontmania 2025. It's a major European tech conference. And if you're operating anywhere near modern software, well, keeping up with front-end development feels relentless, right? You need a fast track to the trends that actually matter.
Exactly. That's our mission today, to give you that fast track. We're pulling out the essential insights, the key.
Oh, well, I didn't want to have you listen to the whole thing anyways, but this generally gives an idea on where I got the idea from. The podcast itself lasts about 10 minutes, so that wasn't enough really for a single session while walking the dogs. And of course, you also have to set up each time what topic you want to listen to. It took up too much work for me to actually start using it while walking the dog, so I was curious to see, can I do something with this? Can I build my own little project that generates podcasts for me? Well, spoilers, I was able to do it, and essentially the requirements for each and every podcast that was generated are, it needs to be background noise. When I often walk the dog, it can be a little bit busy, so I have to walk out for bikers that come by, or keep a close eye on the dogs when they see a green field and they decide that they want to be on the other side of it. So I need to be able to easily tune it out. Of course, most importantly, it needs to be instantly available. I don't want to spend time at first trying to see what I want to have a topic about, or put any kind of effort into it. I just need to leash the dogs, go outside, and instantly be able to listen to something. It needs to be about 30 to 45 minutes, which is about the average length of a walk with the dogs. And most importantly, of course, I also want to have it focused on my own interests, and I also just wanted to hear the latest up-to-date news, so that if I have it on, I can learn something new or be inspired to investigate something. And most importantly also for me, I didn't want it to have any subscription costs, which is why I'm doing everything in a self-hosting manner. I'm assuming most people are aware of this, but every time when you make a call to something like OpenAI via their API, you pay a very small amount of money, and it's negligible. It's less than a cent per request, but still it can go up over time. I already have more than enough subscriptions at home, so I want it essentially to be free each and every day. And the structure of the podcast would also just be very simple. There would be a quick intro which would discuss what topics would be discussed. It would then have a segment for each and every topic where they would discuss whatever article was selected, and then just an outro so that I know when the podcast is over. And from this point on, I actually would like to move on to the actual fun tech part, like how does this whole thing actually work? The process itself is summarized fairly simple. It just gathers articles from an RSS feed. It retrieves and summarizes the content of each article. Next, it will write scripts for the host to read through, which is then all done by generating the audio. And a quick note about the hardware that you will need for this. When it comes to audio generation, I found that what I'm using, Kokoro, works on most things. I just have a Linux container running on a server with minimal resources, and it's just able to generate the audio in a fairly quick manner. And yeah, when it goes to LLMs, you can either use Ollama. Have people here used Ollama before? Yeah, Ollama is just something that you can install on your own computer, and then you can run a couple of models. And then it will generate text much like how ChatGPT does it. It comes with a CLI tool, but also with an API, which you can connect to via JavaScript, make API calls, and it will generate the text for you. And what kind of surprised me is that the lightweight models can work pretty well on fairly old hardware. I have an old laptop that's about 8 to 9 years old, which I'm using as an LLM server, and it generates outputs in something like this in 5 to 6 seconds or so. So that's, if you have any old gaming hardware laying around, have a look and see how well LLM performs on that. But of course, you can also still use an external API like what Anthropic or OpenAI offers. Most likely the content that it will generate could be better, but that will be at a cost. So to get started with actually generating your own podcast, you can clone the project, or you can also create a code space in GitHub itself. I've added scripts inside the repository so that you can very quickly get it up and running in GitHub itself. You need to set up a couple of the external services that it will be using, but there are also Docker files provided within the repository for that. You need to set up a couple of configuration files which will customize what the podcast will be like, and then you just need to run a script, and that's it. The configuration essentially consists of 3 different topics. You need to set up what external services you are using and where the script will be able to find them. The podcast configuration can be set up to configure what I always call the personality of the project, of the podcast. And finally, you also just have to provide it with a couple of RSS feeds to follow. Going from bottom to top, I'd first like to highlight how the RSS feeds work. And I am sort of curious. I often get some blank stares when I talk about RSS feeds. Just a quick show of hands, actually, this time. Who here? All right, that's about as expected at a tech conference. So yeah, I didn't see all hands, so just as a quick summary, an RSS feed, most news websites and blogs have these, and they always contain what the latest articles are that are currently available in there. They are updated each time when an article is added to the website. So if you have an RSS reader, like I'm using Fresh RSS here, then you can always just see what the latest news and articles are that are available on websites. Personally, I recently got off social networks like Twitter and such, and I hadn't been able to keep up with tech news. And for me, RSS feeds are an excellent way to actually to remain up to date with what the latest things are. And again, just a quick couple of hands, please. Who actively uses RSS feeds? Like who looks them up every day or so? I generally had expected at least one hand, but no RSS. Again, I would recommend it. It's an excellent way just to not be entirely dependent on social networks to keep up to date with what the latest news is. So for the configuration for the RSS feeds, you just have to you have to fill in a feeds array in which you just provide a source for each and every feed that you're going to follow. Now, most RSS feeds also have a title that you can give to them, and you can customize it here because otherwise the hosts will start using the title that the RSS feed has, and some RSS feeds like Engadget, they have this really elaborate title like Engadget is your main source for information about the latest gadget softwares and whatnot, and then the host will also say that, hey, I recently led on Engadget is the greatest news source for your blah, 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 and you just don't want that when you're listening to a podcast, so that's why you can also customize them here. And finally, you can also set what the max age is, meaning how old the articles can be, because if you get an entire RSS feed, then they may also start talking about stuff that happened months ago that's just not that interesting anymore, or at least not what you're looking for at the moment. It could still be interesting. Now, for the external services, there are 3 things that you will need to set up. Again, all can be self-hosted. The most important likely one is which LLM service you want to use, which supports the OpenAI API. Honestly, I love that. Essentially, OpenAI has defined a certain way on how you can generate text, which other services like Anthropic and Olama also uses. So this way, you can also easily go from one LLM service to another by just changing the configuration, and then you still get the same output. I'm using Kokoro, which is an open source text-to-speech model, which I think generates some pretty good results. It comes with a couple of dozen of voices that you can use to customize the host. And finally, I'm using Scrapper, which is another open source tool, from which you can download and then extract articles from the web pages themselves. The configuration itself is also fairly simple. You just have to fill in mostly the base URL for each and every service. And then there are also some extra parameters that you can use. For this particular example, I'm using Olama that is locally hosted with a very simple model that does generate fairly good scripts. But if you want to use any other service like Azure OpenAI, then that also just works out of the box. You just need to define the service, the base URL, and then also provide some extra parameters that the servers will likely need at that point. The next configuration, I think, is a little bit more interesting, which is about the podcast itself, in which you are basically saying what kind of podcast it's going to be. So you can set up who the hosts are. You can give them a little bit of a backstory of who they are or the way that they talk, which will be used when they're writing the scripts. You can set the behavior of how they talk with each other, and the number of segments is essentially the number of articles that they will be discussing. The more segments you add, the longer the podcast will be. And what surprised me also here is how easy it is to make something like this configurable. At one point, I also added a host called Bozo the Clown, whose only role was to crack jokes and just ignore everything, and so you got some really weird episodes that way. Or I changed the behavior to say that the host had a terrible hangover and they just wanted to get this over with, so you got this really grumpy podcast, which is fun, but isn't what I wanted to listen to. But what I do like here is how easy it actually is to customize the output of something by just changing a couple of lines in the code itself. And at this point, once you have the external services up and ready, when you have everything configured, then you just need to run npm run start, and it will start the whole process. It will first verify to see if it can actually reach everything. It will very quickly check if the configuration is correct. Then you just have to press Y, and it starts the whole process. The process itself consists of about 7 steps. And I would like to just now highlight how each and every one of these steps work to finally get to the end result, which is the podcast episode itself. So first it will start fetching all the RSS feeds, again using the list that we had earlier. It will store each and every one of these into separate files. Everything during the process, it will create an output directory and add files in there just to keep track for each step to see what the previous one has done. I didn't want to set up anything like a database or something, so everything is just stored within the file system itself. The whole thing is just a very simple JSON file with the title and then just each article. At this point, all the articles have already been filtered out, which are older than 48 hours in this example. Next, it will start picking which articles it will actually talk about. At the moment, this is fairly simple. It just grabs a random number of articles. I would like to expand this at some point where it will actually start using an LLM to determine which articles are interesting, or just to have a variety of topics. I've also had a couple of episodes where they discussed the same topic twice because I had two RSS feeds that had the same article. Now the next part is one that took me a while to figure out, which was actually scraping the content, because I can't just grab the HTML content because it's well filled with all kinds of other things like the title, header, sidebar, footer, all that kind of stuff. And for that I kind of cheated by using Scrapper, which is an open source tool which honestly does most of the legwork already for me. It comes with a simple web UI where you can try it out, but it also has an API to which you can just pass a URL along, and it will then give you already everything filtered out. You just get the main content of the article, which just looks like this. You get the actual text itself, so already all of the HTML has been filtered out. You just get the pure text, which is also what you want for an LLM to work with. You don't want to distract it with anything else like HTML elements or something. It really just needs to know the main thing on what it will be covering. The next one is also that I had to add after a little bit of experimenting, and that is that I also need to actually filter out the segments to actually verify whether the articles are interesting enough for a podcast episode. And this is also the first time where we actually start using LLMs. And yeah, this is a fairly simple prompt to start out with. So I'm just telling it, analyze the following article, determine if it would make for good content. I give it a number of criteria on what makes it interesting or what doesn't make it interesting. Like early on, I had an episode where an RSS feed was basically highlighting an API document, and the hosts were just talking about each and every function and how they work, and it was just the most boring stuff ever. So I had to filter all of that out. As you may know, with most LLMs, you can also tell it what kind of format you want, on how you want to get it back. So I'm asking it to check whether the article is actually suitable, and for debugging reasons, I'm also asking for the reasons on why it is a good article or not. So that later on, when I look back in the logs, I can see why something has been approved or hasn't been approved. I also added this for another reason. At one point, and this confounded me for the longest of times, the hosts would keep on talking about how cookies were a new wave on the web, and it was just changing everything, and people were being angry about it, and it was all about permissions and such. And I looked at what the article was, and it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, it was a technical documentation, but they were just talking about cookies and such. You may see where this was going, because it was just scraping the content from a cookie pop-up. And yeah, the problem here is the LLM doesn't know that that is interesting or not. So this is why I needed to add an extra step to see if what it was able to scrap from an article is actually relevant or not. Now for the next part, you could try to give the entire article when writing a script, but then you get an issue that you could be providing a prompt with too much content, which can confuse the LLM, or they can start focusing on something that isn't interesting or not, or they may even start forgetting their original instructions. So that is why, for the next step, I'm going to ask it to generate a summary for an article. And this was honestly, I think, the biggest work that I had to put into this, because I really just needed a very to-the-point summary, and the LLM would just continue to do things the wrong way for me. It would first just start discussing what the article was about, or it would focus on something that wasn't all that interesting. So first I give it a couple of rules on what it needs to follow, and then I give it the content on what it needs to summarize. But then at the end, I still had to add some critical output requirements. I put these at the end to make sure that it doesn't forget what it needs to do. And I'm just going to go off on a very quick tangent here, but as a developer, this is also what I find a little bit scary, or what I'm a bit uncomfortable with when I am working with an LLM. Namely that as a developer, I'm used to just writing scripts with a very clear flow, if, then, for loops, all that kind of stuff. And with an LLM, especially if you look at something like this, it's essentially as if I am begging a program to please do what I ask you to. And if there are other people here who have worked with LLMs before, please come up to me afterwards, because I really would like to know your experience with this. I'm mostly self-taught when it comes to this sort of to this topic, and yeah, for me it just sometimes feels a little bit scary that I'm just too dependent. That again, like I said, I'm just begging it to please do what I'm asking it to. So when you get a large article like this, with the prompt that I gave earlier, eventually it will just give a quick summary on what it is about. And this is also what I want, because I want the podcast host to just give a quick overview of what an article is about and discuss it with each other. Next, I will also ask it to create a one-line sentence from the summary itself, which will be later used during the intro and outro, so that the host can give an idea on what the podcast will be about, which just generates a one-line summary like this. And then you actually start getting to the fun part, which is generating the scripts itself, what the hosts are going to talk about, which starts off fairly simple. I'm just asking it to generate a podcast conversation between two hosts. The hosts that are stored within the configuration are added here into the prompt along with their behavior. So the end prompt will look something like this. And then I start giving the article details that were generated earlier. It gets the title, the site name, where it came from, and the quick one-line summary. And then finally I give it the entire summary as well. And then at the end, again, with the begging to please do what I ask you to, because you also have to note stuff like here below to tell it to only use letter spaces and basic punctuation, because all the content that will be generated here will be eventually turned into audio, so you don't want your host to use hashtags and that sort of things. And yeah, and again, on top here, some more rules on what it needs to do. The required output format is, again, just going to be a simple JSON object, which is going to look like this. And so then, after it runs the prompt for a single article, then you get something that looks like this. And excuse me while I quickly grab some water. So this is just a simple script in which it says which host is going to say what, how the other one is going to respond to it, and then at the end, and then eventually it will just end, and then it can go on to the next article. So the prompt that you saw earlier will be run for each and every article that it was able to scrape and summarize. Next, then I also ask it to just generate a very simple intro, which will be played from the start. This is also where I use the one-line summaries that were created earlier, so that the podcast can just give a hint on what the topic is going to be about. So the end result will be something like this. It will, again, prompt what the hosts are, how they talk with each other, and then the number of topics that will be discussed. And again, begging. And then eventually, now we have the entire script. We have an intro, we have a script for each and every topic that will be discussed, and an outro. And now we can generate the audio and actually start rounding off this whole thing. For this, as mentioned before, I'm using Kokoro. In particular, I'm using the Kokoro Fast API Docker container, because it already has everything set up for me. It comes with a web UI where you can just try it out. You can select all kinds of different voices that you want to use and see, and just fill in any text and it will generate it for you. It sounds like this.
I'm excited to share an article from Frontmania titled Stop Using JavaScript for That. They're highlighting a shift in web development, where browser makers are pushing functionality back down to HTML and CSS. This change is guided by the rule of least power, which recommends using the least powerful language necessary for the...
Honestly, if you have worked with a service like 11 Labs before, I will admit, I think the results there are likely better, and also when you if you can still remember, the audio from Notebook LM also has a lot of ums and ahs. It sounds a little bit more human. This may sound a little bit more robotic, but again, this is all just for a project of my own, and it's something that I want to listen to in the back. So for me, it's good enough. All the audio is then, each and every line is just stored as a separate MP3 file and are then at the end merged together using FFmpeg. And honestly, just in a very quick nutshell, I have a new podcast episode for me to listen to. Just going to play a quick preview to what the whole thing sounds like. I didn't mention it before, by the way, but you can also set up a jingle or something that it will play at the start and at the end, as well as a whoosh noise between each article so that you know when it goes from one topic to the other.
Welcome back to From the Cluster. I'm your host, Julian Stiles, and today we're going special, Frontmania style. We've got a treat in store for you. Get ready to have your mind blown because our topics are out of this world.
We've got some hot discussions lined up today, Julian. From changes in web development to the intersection of AI and Web3, it's going to be a wild ride. I'm Phoebe Morales, and I'm excited to dive right in with you.
We're always pushing the boundaries on this show, Phoebe, but today feels different. The convergence of these tech fields is making waves, and we don't want our audience to be left behind. We'll get into the nitty-gritty soon enough. I'm excited to share an article from Frontmania titled Stop Using JavaScript for That. They're highlighting a shift in web development, where browser makers are pushing functionality back down to HTML.
So that is essentially what the whole thing sounds like. Again, just with the jingle at the start, it just eases me into the topic, and by the little whoosh sound in between, I know when it shifts from one article to the other. To me, it's pleasant enough to listen to, and yeah, I have honestly been using this almost on a daily schedule now. When I was walking into the venue, I was listening to the latest news. Honestly, I am kind of surprised how much I started using it in my daily life, so yeah, not much more to add there, because there are more than enough ways on how I actually still want to improve the project itself. Everything currently runs in a CLI, and I would rather have there to be an actual user interface where you can just set up everything. The web scraper is, yeah, as I mentioned, a cheat. I think you can also just use plain JavaScript to get content from the internet and filter out the actual content. And 11 Labs does generate better audio files, so I would like to add more adapters to actually start using these services as well. And on the LLM side, I mentioned it before, at the moment articles are picked at random, but I would actually love it if I could have a prompt that will actually filter out or would select topics to have as many different categories to talk about, so it can have some tech news, some VR news, political news, instead of just getting random things. I would like there to be a memory store where it can actually also talk about topics that were discussed earlier in next segments or even into next topics. And as a very pie-in-the-sky thing, I would love it if I could also add an agent that will research a particular topic, go online to see if there is any more interesting news about the article, which I can then also add into the episode, so that not everything is just contained about the content that's inside the article, just to see if I can learn some more about the topic. And to start rounding off this talk, I would also like to very briefly talk about Shut, because I had a little bit of an existential crisis at some point. Dramatic, I know, but allow me to explain a bit further. First off, do I think that what I'm generating will replace podcasts? Will I not be listening to anything else anymore? Absolutely not. No, there's no way. I am impressed with what I'm currently listening to. It works really well, but regular podcasts are better to listen to. It's far more research. Everything works far more better. The hosts have far more, they're more human. There's more spontaneity. Essentially, the podcast is a backup for me. Like, if there is no podcast available for me to listen to, I will quickly put it on and listen to it. And yeah, this may sound also a little bit weird, but to sort of paraphrase Jeff Goldblum, I was a bit too preoccupied with whether I could, and I wasn't wondering with what I should. Because what I'm starting to feel a little bit guilty about is I'm grabbing content that other people have researched, investigated, and then spent so much of their time investigating, writing the articles themselves. And then here I come along, I grab the content, I throw it through a prompt, and now I'm suddenly using their content for my own, for myself, without really, for me it just feels kind of bad. There are certain search engines as of late that have also started adding AI summaries on top, and I feel a bit uncomfortable with that, because essentially these search engines are also just grabbing content from other people, and they just want to make sure that you remain there. There are some search engines that I'm not using for that anymore, and now here I am essentially doing the same thing. In my own defense, I would say, I'm not monetizing this or anything. I am just delivering this entirely for myself. And I also have absolutely no interest whatsoever in monetizing this or putting or creating a business out of it, because I'm not an entrepreneur like that, but also ethics. And I just also really I find it just kind of interesting that I have a podcast that's always entirely focused on what I'm interested in. But I will admit at the end, I do think that the output of this is pure AI slop. I assume most people are familiar with it. You've seen the images, you've seen the stories. Now you've also seen this, and again, like I said, it's for me a backup. It's not something that I want to listen to. Yeah, and it being AI slop, for me, I'm okay with it. I want to be open about what I think about it, but I also want to say I'm okay with it being AI slop. Again, it's good enough. I listen to it while walking the dogs. It's giving me the background noise that I need while walking the dogs. I do find it rather interesting that we're able to use AI to generate content so specifically based on your own interests or something that's available for me, that's just entirely focused on me. I don't think many people here would be interested in the podcast, because they are essentially about topics that I find interesting, but I do like it that other people could use this script and then create something that is entirely focused on their interests. Well, every night I have a server running this script, so at around 3 a.m., so in the morning I have a new podcast to listen to, which is what I wanted at the start, and in the end, the project is also something that just taught me a lot about prompting, about bagging, but also how you can use the results to string everything together into an eventual end product. And of course, honestly, it's also been since the lockdown for a very long time that I've been able to give a talk again. And I'm also just would like to thank Frontmania for giving me the opportunity to do so again, and also want to thank everyone here for the attention that you gave me for this. Again, if you want to give it a look, it's available here. You can also just go to github/rv-leun. It's pinned somewhere on the top. If you want to reach out to me, here are some ways. I'm not much on Blue Sky or Mastodon, so if you really have questions, I would suggest the email. And in the end, are there any questions? Yes?
Yeah, did you try different models and get different results, and also the parameters and stuff?
Let's see. I initially actually started out with a simpler model, Llama 3.1 3B. The results were surprisingly better than I expected there, and then as of late I've also been trying out things with Gamma 2 9B. But so far for me, Llama is always currently a bit my main model that I use, mostly because so far for me it has just generated good enough content for everything. And I did also actually briefly try it out with an Azure OpenAI instance, one of the ChatGPT models, and I was actually surprised that there wasn't that much of a difference between what Olama gave me and what ChatGPT gave me. That could also maybe be because the prompts are a little bit strict, but that did surprise me. Sir?
How long does the whole process take to generate?
About an hour. Also depending on what kind of computer I use. Like if I do it on a gaming computer, it goes far faster, but on the service that I have at home, it takes about an hour.
Is in that hour, it's mostly audio generating that takes time, or is it like the whole LLM?
Mostly the LLM actually, because I'm using a NVIDIA Jetson Nano, which is basically this small Raspberry Pi-like device, and it's just not that fast, but it's good enough to run in the background. Let's see, in the red. I think about 2 months or so, give or take, on and off, working on and off on it. I think I also saw... Oh, here again.
I noticed you're not using structured outputs from the LLM. Is there a reason why you're not?
I am using a structured output, yeah, but I didn't want to go too much into the technical details here. But yeah, like at the end, when it tells you what the JSON format has to look like, I am using a structured output there. Well, again, thanks for your attention.